The conflict between Israel and Palestine is one of the most enduring and complex disputes in modern history. It has spanned over a century and involves a myriad of historical, political, and religious factors. This deeply rooted struggle not only impacts the lives of millions but also shapes the geopolitical landscape of the Middle East and beyond. Understanding the conflict requires an appreciation of its intricate history and the numerous events that have fueled tensions over the years. The region now known as Israel and Palestine has a history that dates back thousands of years. It has been a crossroads of civilizations, each contributing to its rich and diverse cultural tapestry. The ancient Israelites, who are believed to have settled in the region around the 13th century BCE, laid the foundations of Jewish history and religion. The land now known as Israel and Palestine has been home to a multitude of civilizations over millennia. These early inhabitants established the foundational aspects of the region's cultural and historical identity. Among the first significant groups were the Canaanites, who settled in the area around the 3rd millennium BCE. They developed city-states and engaged in trade and cultural exchanges with neighboring regions, creating a vibrant, interconnected society. The arrival of the Israelites around the 13th century BCE marked a pivotal moment in the region's history. According to biblical tradition, the Israelites were led by Moses out of Egypt and into the Promised Land. The geopolitical importance of the region meant it was frequently at the center of conquests and power struggles involving major empires. The Persian Empire under Cyrus the Great allowed Jews to return and rebuild Jerusalem and the Second Temple in the 6th century BCE. This period of relative autonomy was short-lived, as Alexander the Great's conquests in the 4th century BCE brought the region under Hellenistic influence, introducing Greek culture and practices. In Section 3, we delve into the medieval period and its religious significance. The rise of Islam in the 7th century CE dramatically transformed the region. The Islamic caliphates, starting with the Rashidun and then the Umayyad and Abbasid dynasties, established control and integrated the area into the Islamic world. Jerusalem, with its significant religious sites such as the Al-Aqsa Mosque and the Dome of the Rock, became one of Islam's holiest cities. This period saw flourishing trade, cultural exchanges, and relative coexistence among different religious communities. Now let's explore Section 1, the rise of Zionism. The rise of Zionism in the late 19th century marked a significant turning point in the history of the Israel-Palestine conflict. Zionism emerged as a nationalist movement among Jews in Europe, advocating for the establishment of a Jewish homeland in Palestine. This idea was driven by centuries of persecution, pogroms, and anti-Semitism, culminating in the desire for a safe and sovereign state where Jews could exercise self-determination. Theodor Herzl, often regarded as the father of modern political Zionism, convened the First Zionist Congress in Basel, Switzerland, in 1897. This Congress formally established the World Zionist Organization, which aimed to promote Jewish migration to Palestine and secure international support for a Jewish state. Herzl's vision was both a response to the acute anti-Semitism of his time and a proactive strategy to revive Jewish national life in the land of their ancestors. Moving on to Section 2, the British Mandate. After World War I, the League of Nations granted Britain the mandate to administer Palestine. The British Mandate period, from 1920 to 1948, was a time of significant change and escalating tensions in the region. The mandate was intended to prepare Palestine for eventual independence, but it also had the dual mandate of facilitating the establishment of a Jewish national home, as outlined in the Balfour Declaration. During this period, Jewish immigration to Palestine increased significantly, driven by both Zionist aspirations and the dire situation of Jews in Europe. The Jewish population in Palestine grew from about 10% in 1918 to nearly 30% by the mid-1940s. British authorities initially supported these efforts but soon found themselves caught between conflicting Jewish and Arab nationalist movements, both of which sought control over Palestine. In 1947, faced with the intractable conflict in Palestine and unable to find a viable solution, Britain turned the matter over to the United Nations. The UN formed a special committee, UNSCOP, the United Nations Special Committee on Palestine, to investigate and propose a solution. After extensive deliberations and hearings, UNSCOP recommended the partition of Palestine into separate Jewish and Arab states, with Jerusalem placed under international administration due to its religious significance. The UN General Assembly adopted the partition plan on November 29, 1947, as Resolution 181. The plan allocated roughly 55% of the land to the Jewish state and 45% to the Arab state, despite Jews making up about 1/3 of the population and owning less than 10% of the land at that time. The Jewish community accepted the plan, seeing it as a crucial step towards the realization of their national aspirations. The declaration of the State of Israel on May 14, 1948, by David Ben-Gurion, the head of the Jewish Agency, was a historic moment for Jews worldwide. However, it immediately triggered a full-scale conflict as surrounding Arab states, Egypt, Jordan, Syria, Iraq, and Lebanon, launched a military intervention in support of the Palestinian Arabs. This war, known as the 1948 Arab-Israeli War, or the War of Independence to Israelis, and the Nakba, or catastrophe to Palestinians, had profound and lasting consequences. From the outset, the war was marked by intense and brutal fighting. Jewish and Arab forces clashed across the region, with key battles taking place in cities like Jerusalem, Haifa, and Jaffa. The Six-Day War of June 1967 was a pivotal event in the Israel-Palestine conflict, dramatically altering the political landscape of the Middle East. Tensions had been escalating due to frequent skirmishes along Israel's borders, particularly with Egypt, Syria, and Jordan. The situation reached a boiling point when Egypt, under President Gamal Abdel Nasser, mobilized its forces in the Sinai Peninsula and ordered the withdrawal of the United Nations Emergency Force stationed there. This move, coupled with the closure of the Straits of Tiran to Israeli shipping, was perceived by Israel as an existential threat. On June 5, 1967, Israel launched a preemptive strike against Egypt, targeting its air force and achieving near-total air superiority within hours. Section 2. Territorial changes and their impacts. The territorial changes resulting from the Six-Day War had profound and lasting impacts on the Israel-Palestine conflict. Israel's capture of the West Bank, Gaza Strip, East Jerusalem, Sinai Peninsula, and Golan Heights significantly altered the geopolitical landscape and introduced new complexities to the already fraught situation. The West Bank and Gaza Strip, home to large Palestinian populations, became focal points of contention. The Israeli government began to establish settlements in these areas, a move that was met with international criticism and Palestinian resistance. These settlements, deemed illegal under international law, have been a major obstacle to peace negotiations. They not only altered the demographics of the region, but also made the prospect of a contiguous Palestinian state increasingly difficult. Section 3. The occupation and its implications. The occupation of the West Bank, Gaza Strip, and East Jerusalem, following the Six-Day War, marked a new and contentious phase in the Israel-Palestine conflict. The Israeli military presence and the establishment of Jewish settlements in these territories have had profound implications for both Palestinians and Israelis, shaping the political, social, and economic landscape of the region. For Palestinians, the occupation has meant a loss of sovereignty and severe restrictions on daily life. Military checkpoints, barriers, and travel permits have become part of the everyday experience, severely limiting movement and access to resources. The construction of the separation barrier, which Israel insists is necessary for security, has been particularly controversial. While it has significantly reduced terrorist attacks within Israel, it has also isolated Palestinian communities, separating families and cutting off access to farmland, schools, and workplaces. Section 4. The evolution of Palestinian resistance. The occupation of Palestinian territories following the Six-Day War catalyzed the evolution of Palestinian resistance, shaping the strategies and objectives of the Palestinian national movement. The response to occupation has taken various forms over the decades, from armed struggle to diplomatic efforts, reflecting the complex and evolving nature of Palestinian resistance. In the immediate aftermath of the 1967 war, the Palestine Liberation Organization, PLO, under the leadership of Yasser Arafat, emerged as the primary representative of the Palestinian people. The PLO initially pursued a strategy of armed struggle, launching attacks against Israeli targets both within and outside the occupied territories. This period saw the rise of various militant factions within the PLO, each with its own tactics and ideologies, but united in the goal of Palestinian liberation. The Oslo Accords, signed in 1993, marked a significant moment of hope in the Israel-Palestine conflict. These agreements were the result of secret negotiations in Norway, facilitated by the Norwegian government, between representatives of the Palestine Liberation Organization, or PLO, and the government of Israel. The accords aimed to establish a framework for peace with the ultimate goal of achieving a two-state solution. They provided for the creation of the Palestinian Authority, which would assume limited self-government in parts of the West Bank and Gaza Strip. The signing ceremony on the White House lawn, with Yasser Arafat and Yitzhak Rabin shaking hands under the watchful eyes of U.S. President Bill Clinton, symbolized a historic breakthrough. For the first time, both sides formally acknowledged each other's right to exist and agreed to work towards resolving the conflict through negotiation rather than violence. The Second Intifada, or Al-Aqsa Intifada, erupted in September 2000, following the controversial visit of Israeli opposition leader Ariel Sharon to the Temple Mount, a site sacred to both Jews and Muslims. This visit was perceived by many Palestinians as a provocative assertion of Israeli control over a highly sensitive and contested site. The ensuing protests quickly spiraled into widespread violence, marking the beginning of a prolonged and brutal uprising. The Second Intifada was characterized by intense violence on both sides. Palestinian militants carried out suicide bombings, shootings, and other attacks against Israeli civilians and military targets. In response, the Israeli military launched extensive operations in the West Bank and Gaza Strip, employing airstrikes, ground incursions, and targeted assassinations. The conflict resulted in significant casualties, with thousands of Palestinians and hundreds of Israelis killed and many more injured. In 2007, following a violent conflict between the rival Palestinian factions Hamas and Fatah, Hamas took control of the Gaza Strip. In response, Israel, with the support of Egypt, imposed a blockade on Gaza, severely restricting the movement of goods and people in and out of the territory. This blockade has had profound humanitarian consequences, exacerbating the already dire living conditions in Gaza. The blockade has led to widespread shortages of essential goods, including food, medicine, and fuel. The economy has been crippled, with high unemployment rates and significant poverty. Infrastructure in Gaza, including water and sanitation systems, has deteriorated due to restrictions on the import of construction materials. Frequent power outages have become a daily reality, affecting hospitals, schools, and homes. The blockade has also restricted access to medical care, with many patients unable to receive necessary treatment outside Gaza. The issue of Israeli settlements in the West Bank and East Jerusalem remains one of the most contentious and intractable aspects of the Israel-Palestine conflict. These settlements, which are considered illegal under international law, have been a major obstacle to peace negotiations and a source of ongoing tension and violence. The presence of settlements complicates the territorial contiguity of a potential Palestinian state and exacerbates the daily hardships faced by Palestinians living under occupation. Since the 1967 Six-Day War, successive Israeli governments have pursued settlement expansion as a means of solidifying control over the territories. These settlements range from small outposts to large, well-established communities with extensive infrastructure. The settlement enterprise is supported by a combination of government policies, legal maneuvers, and financial incentives, making it a deeply entrenched aspect of Israeli policy. The conflict between Israel and Palestine, rooted in a complex tapestry of historical, political, and religious factors, continues to present formidable challenges. The enduring nature of this conflict is a testament to the deeply entrenched narratives and grievances on both sides. Each phase of the conflict, from the early Zionist aspirations and the British Mandate to the wars of 1948 and 1967, has added layers of complexity, making the path to peace increasingly elusive. One of the most persistent challenges is the issue of mutual recognition and legitimacy. Both Israelis and Palestinians harbor deep-seated fears and mistrust, stemming from historical experiences of displacement, violence, and perceived betrayals. These sentiments are reinforced by daily realities under occupation for Palestinians and security concerns for Israelis. The narratives of victimhood and resistance have become central to the identities of both peoples, making compromise and reconciliation particularly difficult. Despite the seemingly intractable nature of the Israel-Palestine conflict, there remain potential pathways to a resolution. These pathways require a multifaceted approach, addressing the core issues of mutual recognition, security, territorial boundaries, and humanitarian needs. While the journey towards peace is fraught with challenges, understanding the complexities and working towards incremental progress can pave the way for a more hopeful future. One crucial element is the need for sustained and genuine dialogue. Past peace efforts, such as the Oslo Accords, have shown that direct negotiations, even if imperfect, are essential for any progress. Establishing open lines of communication, fostering trust, and building confidence through small, practical measures can create a foundation for more significant agreements. International mediators and regional partners can play a vital role in facilitating these dialogues and ensuring that both sides remain committed to the process.